So we've begun recording. And this is the January 29th, 2021 meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee. So we can take roll call, make sure that we're
I just want to Grace is.
that's Sean Grace. Do you want to introduce yourself? Our new alternate from Southern.
Yeah, hi. I actually was at a few meetings in the fall, the ones I could actually make, because I was told kind of late that I was going to be the alternate. So, but I am here.
Great.
I see that
Because
Mike's here now too.
At just Grace's too, so folks didn't recognize your name, I think.
And calling user 2, is that Barbara?
I believe so.
Barbara, are you there?
Yep, just putting on a mute in between.
Okay. Right, I guess
All good?
I can just say, yeah, I can take down the name, the rest of the names. You can start.
Okay. All right, let's start with item 1, approval of the minutes. So those were included as a link with the agenda, but I'll just bring it up here really quickly, just so everyone knows where to find it. Seeing that? So draft minutes are here. Are you still seeing, when I clicked on the link, are you still seeing what I'm sharing? Are you seeing the draft minutes at this point?
Yep, you're good, Kalina.
I never know if it stays on the first thing or not. All right, so draft minutes were on the agenda. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. And anyone opposed? We'll do it that way so we don't have to poll each time. All right, so everyone, no one opposed? This is correct? All right, so minutes are approved. Item 2, reports of the FAC chair and vice chair. Okay, you know, I almost forgot that we'd had a board meeting since we last met because it's been a while. But yeah, so the December 17th meeting at which David and I presented our, let me close the door because this is, can you close? Okay. The December 17th meeting at which David and I both presented our reports came after our last meeting. So let's begin there. And I'm sorry I didn't include those with the agenda because I think that might have been helpful. But give me one sec. But I think you all know the content of them. There was quite a bit of commentary on both Students First and its effects and the sort of effects of what has become a lot of centralization, right? The increasing portion of the budget that is controlled by the system office, right? So in response to that, oh, hold on, I have the wrong document open. Give me one sec. There we go. So in response to that, I believe we were kind of assured that in January we would get some sort of response to the questions that we had raised. And I think there was a December 23rd sort of system-wide CSCU announcement that reiterated that, right? So here's the quote. In January, the board will receive a full briefing on the status of the Connecticut State Community College, which is on track to be accredited in 2023. The full briefing will respond to many points in the Faculty Advisory Committee biannual report. And actually, I'm only mentioning that because I received a couple emails this morning asking whether you know, they could get the link to the meeting because they were expecting that perhaps that's when we would be receiving this report. There never was a board meeting scheduled for January. So there's, that promise, I don't know how that was meant to be fulfilled. There was also the issue of the David's challenges to the directed cuts at the CSUs. That was also supposed to be reviewed in mid-January. And again, no such meeting or review. So that is too bad. I still don't know, the next meeting of the board is February 16th. And the committee meetings that were scheduled in January have yet to, they were canceled. So we have nothing until February. So there have been no board meetings other than the December 17th meeting since we last met. However, let's look at 117. So the budget bill of 2019 required the system office to report on the financial impacts of Students First in January of June in 2020 and 2021, right? So that report has come out. It's supposed to detail the personnel changes, the total annual cost or savings as a result of the personnel changes, a 5-year budget projection, and copies of all written communication between the board and NECHI. So that might have served as a sort of replacement of that kind of update. However, I've shared that with you all. I don't know how many of you have looked through it. It does not contain a lot of information, right? So, and I will say, especially I think their response to question 2 is either misleading or I don't know what to make of it. It begins the estimate total annual cost or savings. Oh, sorry, that's the question. I'm rereading it. It was the beginning of their answer. So their answer is, as we build Connecticut State Community College, we remain committed to an overall budget reduction for the colleges of $23 million. These savings will be found through administrative reorganization, workforce reductions in areas that do not directly impact teaching and learning. These savings may not be fully realized until 2023, when the merger into one accreditation is realized, as resources are required by the accrediting body to sustain the 12 current colleges. That's new in terms of being explicitly stated, even as recently as the December meeting. It was a bit sort of, I don't know, contradictory or ambiguous, right? Because there was simultaneously the claim that that Students First was part of the commitment to reducing budget woes, and also a request for additional funds so that Students First implementation could be continued without having to reduce services to students and locations, right? So that was the first sort of explicit, like, okay, maybe we're not going to save money until 2023. And it really does not acknowledge the fact that, in 2017, the projection for, what this was going to cost this year was actually about $100 million less than it was projected in 2020, right? So there's still a lot of questions to be asked. I do hope that we get that full report and those questions are answered directly. As far as our relation with the board, because in the same system-wide announcement that said that we would get this report in January, there was also a link to our reports, right, David and I, but the link was incorrect, and David asked for that to be corrected, and it has never been corrected. So there, as usual, there's a lot to be desired in terms of our relations and so on, but there is hope of some improvement. David will update you on that, since it's the result of maybe almost a year of his efforts. Okay, so one of the things that we are responsible for doing is giving the legislature an update in January. And we did meet with we scheduled a meeting with the co-chairs of the Higher Ed Committee, Josh Elliott and with Will Haskell. Josh Elliott was there. The vice chair, Turco, was there. And Haskell's policy guy, his name is Manny, I'm going to screw up his last name, Merskowitz, something like that, No, I'm saying it wrong. I'm definitely mixing it up, but sorry. But his policy guy was there. It was, I would say, a good meeting. The committee has been really attentive and interested, and two of the concepts raised for this session include the need for, the way it was phrased was the need for training of regents. And while that is an interesting way to put it, I think it at least acknowledges that something is to be desired of the way the board is functioning at the moment. Another that would be of interest to us is they attend to address the unfunded pension liability and its effects on students. So that's another one that tends to be of interest. So we asked for something that has not happened since maybe 2011 or 2012. When FAC was first created, there were meetings of the whole FAC and the whole higher ed committee. And for many reasons that has not continued. And part of that is just this weird scheduling, and which has gotten even more difficult as we've gone virtual. But we have asked to have that sort of format again. And it hasn't been denied. They're just still kind of figuring out whether we can do that or if there are other things that might be more productive. So that is a possibility. At the moment, though, I included, I think, 4 bills that already have numbers on the agenda, and they are SB 387, which is a revival of the bills from last year and again from the year before about requiring legislative approval for mergers and closings. There's an HB 5545, which is about the transparency of the system office budget. This is a bill by Greg Haddad. In fact, all of these are. And, you know, there's long been concern about the fact that, as David pointed out, the portion of the system of the budget that the system office currently controls is larger than the portion allocated to any community college. So, you know, that is something worthy of looking into, and I think it requires that they will get a specific portion allocated to them. HB 5465 concerns that unfunded pension liability, and HB 5463 is about SNAP benefits for eligible college students. So those might be of some interest to us. We have I should mention that I met with Andrew Morris, who is, I believe, his official title I probably have wrong, but he's kind of the webmaster, and tried to sort out with him ways of being able to share our information more efficiently. And this is why we now have these links to all of our documents, and we will hook that up to our FAC page so that we will have things will be much more accessible in that way. So we'll put our reports on there, and you'll see that I added an agenda item that I hope will be kind of a standing item that will allow us to kind of receive items of interest from the system and post them publicly, completely publicly on our system. Because before, everywhere that we could send a link from, every document sharing device was limited to either the community colleges or a single university. We have no forum where we can share universally. And as FAC, we need to be able to do that. So we'll have that capacity now. And I'll just mention really quickly that new member is Sean Grace, our alternate from Southern. And you've already kind of introduced yourself, Sean, so thanks. And we have lost Martin Mendoza. That was not his full name. I missed part of his name, but he from Eastern, and he is no longer able to serve. And there will be an election soon for his replacement. And Christine is desperately trying to find a replacement because she's now chairing CSET. But for now, she's still with us, thank goodness, because we're talking about ACME, and her input's going to be really important. All right, that's it. That's all I have to say. David? David's looking like he might have lost connection. So let's potentially come back to him if we can. We'll just pause a little longer. Any questions though, or comments or whatever? More than one of us seems to have connection issues right now. Fran's back. David looks like he's coming back. All right, let's make a note to circle back to David's report when we can, okay? Yeah, we've lost him entirely now. Okay, item 3. Ah, you're back. Yay. So the next item is reopening, which I'd hoped that you would lead discussion on also, and your report. So you're muted.
You're on mute. You're on mute, David.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my internet connection. So, with oh yeah, a follow up to the.
It's cracking up just a little bit.
Yeah, am I back now? Okay,
So.
sorry, I'm going to try and make this quickly. So I had a phone conversation with Matt Fleury, was at my request, as a follow up to the motion that we had passed, I believe, in November, but which we reaffirmed in our annual report, and that is that we wanted to revise the relationship between the faculty to 2 issues. One was the biannual joint meeting of the Board of Regents and the Faculty Advisory Committee, which is required in Section 185 of the statutes creating the Public Higher Education Act in Connecticut. And secondly, that we wanted to have regular reports at each meeting of the board of the Faculty Advisory Committee, as is the case of the committees of the board. If they don't have anything to report, they simply say no report at this time. But we have been relegated to 2 reports per year. And as we are, in fact, mentioned in the statutes as a committee, in effect, for the board, it seems that we should, in fact, have a regular report. So those are the 2 items I discussed with them. I put that in a more general context of what I consider, and I think we all consider here, the crisis of the relationship between the board, the system office, and the faculty at the community colleges over Students First. Secondly, the reaction which has occurred offers for the new collective agreement. I didn't go into details, but I did indicate that it seemed to me that it really is a throwback to the pre-1983 conditions before the 4 CSUs actually became universities, when they were still colleges, including eliminating the clause on academic freedom, eliminating research funds, travel funds for conferences, student faculty research, and faculty development of courses, to mention just a few. And the third issue was, of course, the search committee or the advisory search committee for the CSU president, and the resolution that we had passed requesting that, in fact, there be open interviews with the 3 finalists. So if we look at that, there were basically 3 issues. 1, students first, 2, the collective agreements, and 3, the search for the CSU president, where we are, I think the term I used was possibly or probably, at least from the point of view of an outside observer, heading on a collision course. And I said we need to normalize the relationships between the faculty advisory committee and the board in order to deal with those three issues. The agreement that we have is that we will have a meeting on February the between the FAC and Matt Fleury Jane Gates, the interim CSU president, and Al.
And while David comes back, I think Merle Harris will also be there. Oh dear. All right, so Fran and David keep going in and out. We'll come back to David if necessary. Let's move on to item 3, reopening. So I'd hope that David would lead that part of the discussion. I have a feeling that universities have more to say about these conditions than the colleges, but I'll just open it up to hear whether there are any concerns or how is that going? I think I'm only looking at, there we go, Mike Shea. Hi.
I not very well. I would say we haven't had direct reports yet. I think one of the good things, I think there's going to be communication with the members. Is this me making all that noise? I'm sorry, but I don't know what that is. By the way, I've been having connections problems too, Colina. Not going in, but things like this happening, sound and slow video. So I'm sorry if that makes noise. But any case, we've been told that there will be some of the negotiation material will still be, even though the negotiation is done in private, communication with members about some progress, and they're also negotiating whether the negotiation should be public or not. That is to say, open to the public for people to see. I don't think that's been decided yet. Sean might be able to remember more than I what we've been told at Southern, but it hasn't been a lot yet because this is the first week of school. We had a meeting, but I would say basically, it certainly started out poorly in the sense that what David was talking about, the demands being so draconian, and but I guess been talking since then and making a little bit of progress. So that's not very informative, but I thought you might want to hear something.
Mike, can I jump in here? It's Sean.
Please do.
I'm part of the negotiating team, and the ground rules have been pretty much set up, and the negotiations won't be open. They'll be open to the members of the negotiating teams on both sides. The negotiating team members are not allowed to speak to the press, but we can speak to members, and then the members can do what they want to do. And yesterday, if yesterday is indicative of what the negotiations are going to be like, the mantra coming from the BOR's negotiators are a complete return to management of almost all faculty-driven items on campuses, including tenure, scheduling, hiring of adjuncts, almost anything. They kept saying over and over and over again, we feel we can be more nimble and quick by simply taking that responsibility and returning it to management. To me, it was after 5 hours of listening to them go through point by point of their proposal, that kind of stuck out. But what also stuck out to me is just the total lack of knowledge about what shared governance is and how a university runs. Based on everything they said yesterday, it would take them probably 10 years to create all the policies that they would need to create and put in place and see if they actually worked in order for all of those responsibilities to be returned to management. And we're not going to be meeting with them again until 2 weeks from yesterday. So another 2 weeks from now.
Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, this is Jen Long. Could you just clarify to whom you were speaking?
We were speaking to the lead negotiator, Andy Kripp.
Okay, thank you.
Their entire team was present. I didn't write down all their names, but they have quite the team. The team doesn't say anything. They just filter comments to the lead negotiator via text or via emails during the meeting.
Anyone else? And I have to say, so this is supposed to be about reopening, but it's clear that the negotiations aspect of it is much more pressing than any of the health and safety at the moment. I'm never sure how much we talk about here and how much we don't, but I think the more that people know about what's happening, the better, especially since we're all probably in for the same sorts of asks and things. So anyone else on this?
I'm sorry, I missed quite a bit of the discussion there, but I did catch the last comments.
David, could you try turning off your video and seeing if you stay with us that way? As we wait for him, are we good with reopening otherwise? I mean, we'll get to the IT stuff in two items from now, but
One
yeah, go ahead.
possibility is for,
Oh, go ahead,
sorry,
Barbara.
can you hear me?
Yeah, and then Jen's hand.
David could just call in. That's working fine.
Go ahead, Jen, and I'll text David.
Yeah. I think Fran's having the same thing. He's having bandwidth issues, so that will take care of it.
Colleen, if I may, when you're asking about reopening, are you asking if it's related to student issues, our issues? What reopening? Is that just a broad, how is it going?
Just broadly, I hadn't heard of any actual issues, which is amazing, given how stressful it was figuring out on ground, virtual, whatever last semester. And I just wanted to make sure I, suspected that universities are a little bit more pressured to be on ground and perhaps struggle more than the CCs are. So
Right.
just checking in to hear whether there's anything of concern. I see Jen and Mary Beth have hands up.
But so I wanted to talk about my experience because I work directly with students,
Mhm.
and where we do offer on-ground courses. My biggest concern, which I've mentioned to all of who are involved with orienting the new incoming students, is that students are confused with which platform they're registered for. It seems in the beginning, and as we heard from Steve yesterday, there's some students that are not logging into their portals for any of the asynchronous or synchronous courses. And we don't know if that has to do with the connections or what that really is attributed to. But other than that, we do know universally the numbers are down in terms of enrollment.
Yeah. Thanks. Jen?
I could just report that at Three Rivers, tentatively, we're planning most of the classes to still be Elron for the fall. But I think that's subject to change. That's kind of the plan so far. And I think that after speaking with our faculty senate, faculty are really killing it. They're working hard. They're up to speed with the technology. And I think overall it's been a good experience, and we'll see more and more classes continue to be online or hybrid than prior to the pandemic. And I would say that the management on our campus has been pretty reasonable working with people, and that students are pretty much in the loop, but the ongoing lack of IT support is profound and a huge, huge problem. We also had someone pop into a WebEx classroom, take over the class from the teacher, draw all these vulgar images and scream obscenities at the teacher last week. And she didn't have the settings in place to not give those permissions. So there was a case of that at Three Rivers, and it was horrifically bad. So I just wanted to let people know that about WebEx. Check your settings.
Saved from that in WebEx. Okay, thanks. Mary Beth.
I was just going to basically report that it seems like things are very up in the air still at Untuck. I know there's a coordinators meeting, and actually might have been yesterday, or if not, it's early next week, to discuss summer and fall. And I think that there's a really wide dichotomy. There are some faculty that I've talked to that are like really just want to be 100% back on campus in the fall. And then there's another group that are really just like, it's January. We have no idea what September is going to be like yet. And it's too preliminary to plan at this point. So there's kind of a little controversy going on. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen, what our schedule is going to look like at this point, but kind of where we're at.
Yeah, thanks. And Northwestern, I'm seeing in the chat, Northwestern and Eastern are both planning fully online summer sessions, it seems. Okay, if we're good with that, let's move on to, item 4, that's a big one. So item 4, the ACME draft policy, and I will kick it to you, Jen, to lead us through this.
Thank you. So Christine Ruggiero, who is on, is the co-chair of CSET, and she has prepared an overview for you all about how things went when Jane Gates came to a recent meeting. And I do have some follow-up commentary also, if we have time, that I'll share after she presents. And I think it sounds like she's on the computer, but she's having maybe some audio issues, but she's going to keep her camera off. So Christine, can you hear me? Can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So Jane Gates attended our last CSET meeting, which was on the 22nd, last Friday. And I saw, Kalina, that you had sent out the CSET response to the ACME draft policy. So thank you for that. And if you took a look at that, we commented on the policy draft, and we also followed up with a list of questions for Dr. Gates that we felt, we really needed answers to before we could provide copious feedback. And we weren't sure how the meeting was going to go. We weren't sure if Dr. Gates was going to go through our questions or not. And lo and behold, she did not go through our questions. However, what she did do was she went through a list of misconceptions based upon the public commentary or feedback received on the draft policy. And she did admit that she was surprised by the number of misconceptions and realized that they were really the outcome of poor writing or unclear writing in the draft. So there were a number of misconceptions, and she tried to provide some clarification on those. Beyond that, she listed what she called common trends as part of the feedback. And her main comment about the trends was that she felt that the feedback came from a deficit perspective, focusing on what students cannot do rather than on what students can do. And so she went through some common trends as part of the feedback. One thing that she did say is that the ACME policy is not going anywhere, but that she does recognize, and Fran and Mike and David, and Ken, they all recognize that it needs to be revised. The extent to which is certainly, still unclear. It's unclear how much CSET and or others will be able to influence the revision. She also, I think she's also looking for clarification. She said that she received, this stood out to me a little bit. She received some commentary that it was an anti-racist, that it was a racist policy. And of course, if you read, at the beginning of the policy, it says that the whole point of this is to create, greater equity. And she, is looking for clarification. So she kind of called out members of CSET asking if any member of CSET was the person who gave her that feedback on the policy. She really wanted clarification. She was really, kind of dumbfounded by that comment. I can tell you that as a follow-up, Susan Gentry from Tunxis and I are the co-chairs of CSET, and we reached out. We thanked Dr. Gates. She definitely was patient and generous with her time. She stayed at the meeting and she definitely answered a lot of follow-up questions. But she sent our notes to Fran, and Susan and I have a follow-up meeting with Fran to see what CSET's role could be in the revision process. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but our meeting is on next Thursday. I'm happy to field questions. I have 10 pages of notes in front of me to try to, give some clarification if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Christine.
Christine, this is Ron Picard. Hi. I think. Hi. I think perhaps the racist business. I might be. I'm trying to analyze this. I'm trying to look at it and think about this, and based upon what people have told me and what I've heard. I think if you go and you look at the math portion, right, and the math portion is in terms of that students will be taking this math literacy course, right? Which may or may not, which will be forced. The universities will be forced to accept as transfer, but nobody knows anything about that the only students in STEM would have to take courses that would lead to the algebra track. Okay, and everybody else would take this math literacy course. And we don't know whether or not the criteria for that course is college level. And I think when people are saying it's racist, perhaps, and again, I may be reading too much into this, perhaps they're saying that, that students who, that there is a correlation between our students of color and our developmental students. And that if our developmental students are going to be forced into a track that does not prepare them for STEM degrees or STEM, and are taking a math course that is really, say, a middle school math course rather than a college math course, that is detrimental to our students of color because they are being forced into a course that is not really a college course. And again, I think this is the result of that course not being fully defined, and nobody knows what it really is. And the assumption is that it's if we are looking for an easier path towards students completing their math requirements, that it may not be a course that prepares students well for and limits their ability to pursue programs and careers that they may want to. That's my guess anyway.
Thanks. The only thing that Dr. Gates, as you know, we're an English group, so we focused on English impacts to English. But the only thing that she did say is one of the misconceptions that came out from the feedback is that there's an idea that the policy removes algebra from the math pathways. And she said that's not true at all, that faculty choose the contextual algebra that's needed for their area. And that was really the limited information that she gave us on math. And I don't know if she's meeting with the math group separately or not, but ESL was also, the ESL, the council chairs were also at our meeting. I just wanted to add that.
Well, it was from the math, the CMAC's. That's not how CMAC read the document. That the document to them basically stated that only the algebra track would only be for STEM students, and all other students would be forced into this perhaps non-college level math requirement.
Yeah, and that was, you know, one of the things that we spent, I think, the first 15 minutes of our meeting talking about, was that the writing was, you know, ambiguous, that it really wasn't clear enough. And, you know, a lot of revision, in our opinion, really needs to be made. So.
Well, it's clear that they are planning to revise the document.
Go ahead, Jen. You got it.
Sorry, Ron, do you mind? Ron, thank you for those points as well. I wanted to speak about the racist bit too, if that's okay. I think for me, which I didn't say to Dr. Gates yet, but one of the outcomes of the meeting also was that she's willing to set up a meeting with me to look at the 096 curriculum to see essentially what would be lost if we move forward with the policy. And what I wanted to share from my viewpoint of why I believe that this is fundamentally racist is relates to those lower level developmental students and the mission of the college, because I think that Dr. Gates is coming to this from the perspective of increasing graduation rates, and that is her main focus. I believe the mission of the community college is to help people in the community, and those lower performing students who may have organic learning issues sometimes will not be able to graduate. And I think that many of the faculty, especially developmental instructors, feel that there is value in increasing the literacy in those students anyway. And I could give you countless examples of times where I've had students in tough situations with their bosses, and in talking about it through their writing, ended up standing up to the boss, left the job, advocated for themselves, or even chose to read to their children when they had never been read to as children. And those ripple effects into our communities, even for students who don't graduate, are profound. And I view this policy as something that is going to be impossible for that lower percentage of students who come in at a 6th or 7th or 8th grade reading and writing ability, who aren't likely going to get through comp and pass and move on, and some students with profound learning challenges who come to our campus, that those students will simply get into this co-requisite model of college level English, for example, and they won't be able to do it. They'll be like a deer in headlights, and they'll be presented with texts that they cannot understand. They might be able to literally read them, but they can't inferentially read them. And there will not be enough time on task and intervention with reading with this policy. So yes, I do agree also that the bulk of those students tend to be minority students. And in that way, I think the policy, the unstated assumption to the policy is that we don't care about the community college mission of serving the entire community, regardless of graduation rates, because graduation rates are going to trump everything else. And I don't think she can really look at what the content is that's covered and what would be removed and what's expected in comp if we're not lowering the rigor and argue for anything else, because there simply are students who we know that cannot graduate and will not graduate because of organic learning issues, but there still is value in teaching them. So I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but that to me is the real big issue here. And that is a systemic societal issue, and why we need to put our funding into things like childcare and affordability and getting students to campus and making sure that people living in poverty have access to food and things like that. There's so many bigger issues, and I think they're missing the boat when they're saying that faculty aren't trying enough, or we're failing, or we don't get it, or we're holding students back on purpose. So I just wanted to kind of speak to that, because that was my commentary when she was speaking. And if I get the opportunity to talk with her in a very kind, light way, I might bring some of that up. But I just wanted to kind of gauge your feedback on that notion of You might not see it as much as the four-year colleges, but I believe the reason I do this job is for that mission, for that tiny group of students. And to watch it be wiped away isn't really a blow to my ego because it's my life's work. Like, I will get over that. It is just heartbreaking because I know those students will be in the classrooms. The teachers won't necessarily have the skills to work with them, and they will leave. And that's heartbreaking. And I think to whatever extent that the FAC can rally support behind that population, I think that that could essentially, in some ways, bring us back to a conversation about our mission. So thanks for letting me rattle on.
And Jen, can I just, it's my understanding, and I see now that there are two other hands raised, but it is my understanding that there is no, the research does not, the research is consistent with what you're saying, that this co-requisite model is appropriate for a small band of students and not for all students. So the issue is that it's being applied to all levels of readiness. Is that correct? And I know, and I'm saying that only because I've read, Deb provided some stuff, and William Key, who is here at this meeting, so jump in whenever, William, have done some reviews of the research, the available research. And it's not so much a difference in opinion as much as an absence of evidential support for some of the approaches that they're going after. Is that correct?
Yes, and to further clarify, prior to PH 1240, many colleges had multiple levels of developmental, and we consolidated all of those into one semester of instruction. When you look at the data that was collected, the students in the embedded, like the 101S and the AOP models, those students saw progress. However, we didn't see a dip in retention and persistence with the lower level 096 students, which really speaks to how well the faculty did, that in a one-room schoolhouse model, there wasn't this dip in success for those students. And in fact, they remained the same. And even though they remained at the same level, that's still amazing if you think about covering 9th through 12th grade reading, writing, and critical thinking in one semester class with a super heterogeneous grouping of students. That's an amazing feat for faculty. And so so none of the data that I have heard of for the guided pathways shows that guided pathways increases success for that lower performing group of students. And they're just not captured. And I think that the real outcome of all of this is that they will get put in a co-requisite model, and that extra time on task and the, what did they call it, just-in-time intervention is not going to be enough for them. And I don't know if that clarifies things. Thanks.
Yeah. So I think it was Mary Beth and then Ron and then Christine had hands up, if I got that right.
I just wanted to, thank you, Kalina. I just wanted to say, I also teach not entirely developmental, but I teach many developmental math classes. And I completely agree with what Jen is saying. And I think there is definitely a proportion of developmental math students that probably could go into the co-requisite model and be successful, but not the whole population. And I think that's really where the disconnect is. It's not that we're saying it can't work at all. It's just that it's not going to work for everybody. And so that was the problem with the proposal, is that they were just saying it had to be for everybody. And so I think, the issue was just that the idea that it was just going to be a one-stop shop for everybody. And, there are students, in the math area that are, like Jen said, probably never going to be able to get through regardless. And those students are just going to be deer in headlights. No matter how many supports you give them, if you put them in a classroom with students that are just way far ahead of them, it's just going to be a really difficult stretch for them. And there's a lot of other things that the math group is very concerned about, but that I think is a big piece, and I think goes to what you were saying in terms of the racist part, is because those students, we're really setting those students up to fail. It seems like we're trying to help them achieve, but we're really just setting them up to fail, and I think that really is kind of the disconnect, in my opinion.
Go ahead, Ron.
Okay. I think just to build off of what Jennifer and Mary Beth both said, I think the suspicion is that once we see that this new system, first of all, we have no evidence that this will work for the students at the low level, as Jennifer and as Jen and Mary Beth have both said. However, if it doesn't work, I mean, perhaps it works, I don't know, but right now we know what we're doing is working better than what we were doing before. Okay, but we don't know what this new thing is going to do, and faculty suspect because of what they've been doing now, they suspect that it's not going to work. And I guess the suspicion is that when it doesn't work, faculty are going to be called on to reduce the rigor of our courses and, you know, set everybody else up for future failure, not failure in these courses, but future failure in the rest of their academic career and in their post graduate career. So I think that's the scary part of all this. We know what we're doing now, that PA 1240 had worked, and the way in which PA 1240 was adopted, it was adopted in a way in which 12 different colleges could do 12 different experiments. Okay, and so we had these little microcosm things going on. So if it didn't work in one place, it worked someplace else, and you can make alterations. And every year, colleges made adjustments and so on. However, this is a one-size-fits-all for every single college in the state of Connecticut. And if it fails, it's going to fail for everybody. It's not going to fail at one institution, and there's not going to be any other colleges. There's not going to be another college that we could sort of say, wow, it's working over there at Gateway. It's working over there at Tunxus. We'll just change ours to adopt to that, right? We don't have, because they're going to a one college model, we will not have small experiments going on to find out what works and what does not work. And currently there is no evidence to suggest that what they are putting will work. Okay, and that's what's scary. And when it doesn't work, faculty usually what happens there is we get pushed towards social promotion, because that's what happened K through 12, and basically that just sets students up for failure at the state university level, sets them up for failure in their careers, and it's just really a disaster in the making. So I think that's where the fears lie and the potholes lie in this whole thing.
I think Christine was going to jump in, but I see you, Christine. I missed you. Go ahead.
To piggyback on what Ron just said, I mean, we care a lot about literacy, and I think that's at the core of our concern, is that the curriculum is going to be dictated, and that curriculum is going to be watered down, or else there's going to the adjuncts or part-time instructors will feel pressure and start passing students who really aren't meeting the one-on-one outcomes, or at least the one-on-one outcomes prior to this policy. So one of our questions to Dr. Gates was about reading. One of my colleagues likes to say that reading is really this sort of silent crisis in the United States, and it's not talked about enough. And we really want to make sure that reading is one of the outcomes of English 101. I mean, how can it not be? But we are worried that the curriculum is going to be dictated, even though, as Dr. Gates put it, she said no, that the policy, quote, sets parameters and operational conditions, and then the faculty will determine the curriculum. But one of our concerns is to make this sort of sweeping policy change and not pilot it. And I agree with what you said, Ron. I mean, we won't have these pockets of sort of experimentation to see what works, what doesn't work. We're supposed to be innovative, and we shouldn't have this sort of one size fits all. So I think that when Susan and I meet with Fran, that is going to be one thing that we recommend is trying to pilot this idea rather than making that sweeping sort of broad change. If anyone's interested, Dr. Gates mentioned what she called national experts in the country, and they're looking at these particular models. One is Tennessee, the other is CUNY, and another is California. And, you know, we're also wondering if we can kind of model, I can't remember if it's California. I think it might be California. They have like a year-long comp. So we are trying to see, well, if we have a year-long comp, that's sort of like taking 096, right? And then 101 and putting them together. You know, we're just trying to be creative about, you know, using these models and what we think might work for our students as a way to kind of salvage, you know, our developmental and our most disenfranchised group.
So I put my hand up. So let me try to just because I think these conversations can be really tricky, especially when we talk about race. And I heard, you know, I heard about that aspect of the conversation and really wanted to understand. I think both there's a disagreement, and both people are both sides are really talking about the equity effects, but we keep slipping into these things like accusing, you know, saying that maybe faculty are taking a sort of deficit view of their students. But you know, we don't have, this isn't about perception, or this is documented, right? And we know, I think there's a incompatibility of method in our approaches, because if you think about the kinds of, and this again could be one of the things that that Dr. Gates would say is one of the misperceptions, but it is a widely held misperception. It has not yet been cleared up by the policy. What you just said, Christine, is very promising, and the fact that there's room for creativity and adaptability, that would be wonderful. But what we've been hearing in terms of design has been all about everything being scalable, which means that everything needs to sort of be universally applied, which is completely inappropriate to what we know about Connecticut, and about the variations in access to, you know, education from neighborhood to neighborhood to neighborhood. And we know that, you know, what is this, 25 years more than that, after Sheff versus O'Neill, for example, Hartford school systems are still considered to be segregated. More than 50% of their schools, of Hartford students, go to schools that do not meet the standard of integration, and that has effects, right, for the standard of education they get. So if you think about the fact that we need to be responsive to neighborhoods and the communities that we serve, and the variations of like what the variability in what our students have access to, but we're designing universal solutions, that just does not seem compatible, because how do you serve your students and under-resourced, you know, K through 12 systems? That is what we're doing, right? We are filling that gap, and every community college is serving a different set. So I think that's also part of the resistance and that connection to race, because we're fully aware that the level of education that you get in the state is highly correlated with your race, and your neighborhood. So these are not about attitudes of professors towards their students or subjective ideas about differences in preparedness. These are issues that we've been struggling with as a state, you know, but they tend to get so sticky. And I really do think it's at the most basic sort of logical level, we are approaching this with inappropriate methodology given the variability that we're dealing with. That's my personal sort of approach, but I think it's important to really say that. Go ahead, Jen.
I love that we're discussing this through FAC. Is there some type of mechanism for us to talk about this more formally with Dr. Gates about that issue, since it is such a pressing concern of hers, that's the perception? Because I think that we've made a lot of good points here, and I don't know if that might have an impact. But I love what you're saying, Colina, and I think that you captured it so well, and I think it's something she needs to hear. And I didn't know if that's something that you're working on and thinking about personally in connection with her, and if you wrote your own kind of public feedback to the ACME policy, or if it's something that is the FAC we want to take up as an issue or think about. I'm just throwing that out as a question.
Let me answer that, and then I think Myrna has a hand, and I'm not sure whether Christine's hand is left over from before or not. But so in response to that, in terms of matters of race and methodology, several of us have made sort of gestures towards engaging in that conversation with Dr. Gates, starting with a 4-page letter that was delivered about 6 months ago. It's a touchy conversation, probably not the best conversation to always have in a public forum, because you need the room to make mistakes with people that you trust, right? The slightest misstatement can get you in trouble. So it would have been really nice to have spent these months having these sorts of engagements and hashing out sort of theoretical differences about the best way to approach them. But there has been no such engagement. There is an item on the agenda which is about inviting people to the meeting, and one of those people might be Jane Gates, so we could talk about that. But I will say that I'm on the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, so we are talking about a draft policy right now. It's important to remember that it is a draft policy, but the reason that we're talking about it at length is that things have come in final form to ASA without warning before. And I wanted to make sure that I was ready for that and that everybody had sort of contributed so that I'm not the sole person speaking in response, hi Kat, in response to this policy, because this isn't even my area of specialty, right? So, luckily we've been collecting on the agenda for this meeting. There is such a long list of documents prepared by people across the system. There are more that will be added later so that they're publicly available to everyone. It's encouraging, I think, that maybe the final document will not be as static as this one is at least perceived to be, and as sort of universally applied as this one seems to be, and that there is engagement. So that's great. My initial thought was that if you look at the CMAC response, CMAC has a chart that lays out the distinct differences between what was recommended by the faculty work group and what the policy actually states. There's another issue of the fact that the policy, in effect, dictates the university's, prerequisites, by simply stating, not even as part of the policy, but in its definition of terms, that the universities will accept these courses, right? So just on the face of it, there seem to be real governance issues. And it is my expectation that should we write something to NECHI or something like that this year, this would be a topic. And I was hoping that people who were more familiar with the real effects and content of this topic would take on the responsibility of creating a group who would create a final report on not just this draft and our responses to it, but also the process that leads up to the eventual final result, so that we get a good account of what this is. So that is what I'm kind of hoping, whether this time or next time we establish some such group to document this, because I think in Dr. Gates's words, there have been like hundreds of pages, of response, and those need to get out there, because one way or the other, we are experimenting a bit, and I would love to see like documentation from Tennessee, documentation from California. How did this go? So that we can all learn from each other, and we should be documenting it clearly and making that available as much as is possible. So. Sorry, very long answer. And was it Christine whose hand? No, Myrna. Was it Myrna? Yes. Myrna, whose hands was up. Myrna, is your hand still up?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you, Kalina. I just wanted to make a couple of observations and comment on agreeing with everything you say, as Jen had indicated. But one of the things that's kind of is something that I don't know is happening when we talk about race, I'm wondering with the institutions, the community colleges that are located in predominantly white areas where students are experiencing the same developmental challenges as students who are in the suburbs, has there been a comparison? Because where I'm hearing a lot about that the tendency of students that are in the remedial courses are students from a marginalized community. I'm just wondering if that is the case with rural Connecticut. And is that analogy ever been made? Because I too, like you, Kalina, I have some issues with with not comparing apples and apples. And I'm seeing that they're saying, okay, so the pockets of students are coming from the Hartford, Waterbury, Bridgeport, the higher populations of students that are considered protected class and marginalized. But I happen to think that there are, and Jen, I know you probably have something to say about this. So that's one of my concerns, is that I don't hear a lot of comparisons to apples and apples versus looking at the system and looking at the diverse population that we serve, that there are pockets of rural Connecticut that have similar challenges that our urban students may have. The other thing I was going to say in terms of what Kalina, just to add, in terms of the preparation, I do know that in working in articulation, that it's really, really going to be a challenge for us, the four-year institutions, and I can speak for Central, to accept some of the remedial courses towards a program of study, regardless of whether it's a STEM program or a liberal arts program. And the reason is because all our programs require 2 math courses, and typically statistics is one of them, which require a higher level of algebra. And so if you're going to propose these courses, all of our programs at the four-year institutions, at least at Central, I can speak for Central, will require 2 college-level math courses. And if our math department decides, and they have already, that the mathematics for literacy or literacy mathematics, I'm not sure what it's called, has not been accepted to date. That's just it's not anecdotal, it's a fact. So unless it's changed in terms of the content and the outcomes, that's going to be a hard push. And I agree with everyone 100%. There shouldn't be a cookie cutter type of program because of the diversity in the learning styles of our students coming to us. So thank you. That's my 2 cents. And Jen, I know you wanted to reflect on something I said, so thank you.
If I may, I would just
Alina, I just want to get in line here. It's Barbara.
Oh, sure.
I don't have to go next, but just at some point I want to say something.
Oh, okay. Barbara, may I reply to Myrna quickly?
Of course.
Okay, thanks. So I just wanted to speak anecdotally to this point. I worked in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania for a number of years, and the vast majority of my developmental students were white. And most of those students, we only had the 1 level of developmental. Most of those students had profound organic brain issues that impacted their learning. And so I view developmental, when I think of developmental students, I think of students that missed a gap of time in their education where they had a struggle and they need somebody to teach them and scaffold them those skills, and then they can do it. When I think of remedial, I think of a student where no matter how many times you go over it, they might not be able to remember or they can't comprehend it in a certain way. So that's how I always look at things. When I think of my students in Lancaster County who were mostly white, a lot of those students were remedial by my definition and struggled with actual brain things that were preventing them from learning. When I think about my students in Camden, New Jersey, who were mostly minority students, and my students in New London and Norwich, where I've been working for the past 15 years, most of my white students in my classes went to NFA and they had IEPs in high school and they have autism or some other profound issue that's impacting their memory or their learning, whereas the vast majority of my minority students were in foster care programs where they were abused and lost big chunks of time. They were in bad school systems. They didn't have the support, etc. But if given scaffolded instruction in a thoughtful way and you appeal to those students in a way that engages them, they can learn. So I would argue, by my definition, that many of the, at least in my experience, many of the minority students in our developmental program are developmental students who had a gap in their learning, and they can be remediated out of that. Whereas I see more of the white students as having types of issues, the ones who land in those types of issues where learning has always been a challenge for them. And I think that's the difference. Again, totally anecdotal, but that's where I see the failing in the system of how the students got there by the time they're 18. I don't know if that helps, but does that clarify anything, Myrna?
Yes, very much so. Thank you for that. But see, you see it from a very holistic approach. And so unless you're writing up these proposals with that mindset, I think we're missing the point. And we still will continue to have these systemic issues that you clearly indicated in the beginning of your statements. I just don't think it's being seen that way. And until you have examples of what you're defining as where the learning curve is for each of your students, you can't use a cookie cutter situation, and you have to use all populations that would potentially experience what you just described. Right? So how do we deliver that to, I mean, I think what Kalina was saying in terms of having someone review all of what we should be reviewing in order to implement some kind of program is essential. Otherwise, we're setting our students up for failure again. My 2 cents.
And I'll just say that there are people who, in math especially, who worked on that to the last moment. And with that sort of view, because they work with these students all the time. And that is what, spurred that comparison chart, because they were just kind of heartbroken with the outcome. What they recommended was not what was implemented. But apparently, there's still room to work with it. So, hope so. Sorry, Barbara.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful discussion. This is an amazing group. I'm really saddened by it because I think that the people who run this place are set on a policy of optics instead of reality. They don't really care if the students are getting an education. What they care about is that the graduation numbers go up and it looks good. And that is a tragedy for so many students that, all of us who teach at community college have our special favorite people. My special favorite people are the ones who have very low skill levels but are incredibly bright. And I just always look for those people. I try to get to know them, I talk to them about raising their aspirations. But those people won't be served by this because they won't have a chance to get the skills that let them go forward. And that is having a graduation factory where everybody looks on the community colleges as a second class, extra high school thing, and trying to then force the universities to accept that as reality when it's just optics. I hate the word optics. I think we should deal with truth. That's it.
All right. Shall we move on to item 5? Okay. So item 5, HR and IT. Go. It has been an experience, so I don't know where you want to go with this. I actually spent quite a lot of time talking to Joe Talisano yesterday, talking to various IT folks. So I don't know what we want to address or talk about there. And I had shared with you a link that at the time that I shared with you, I thought it was relevant to what was going on for the past couple of weeks. And it turns out those are separate issues. So let's just talk generally, and I'll propose what I'm going to propose.
Well, this is
Okay, I'm shocked. Oh, go ahead, Mary Beth. Oh, and I see you, Mike, also. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I was very impressed by the Gateway resolution that you shared. I think it highlighted so many of the really important things that we've all been talking about, as just the timing of all of these updates and things has just been so clearly not educationally student focused, and clearly done by people who don't understand the way a semester runs, you know, and the really important key time periods. So I thought the resolution was great from Gateway, and I hope other schools or FAC or, you know, will kind of continue with that, because I think those are really important.
Mike?
I was only going to say I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, that we at the I don't know what was happening on the community college. Universities were allowed to use Zoom again this semester, which was a really good outcome. I know there was a lot of faculty activity leading to that in terms of kind of a write-in campaign. But anyway, it was good that happened, I thought.
I think the unions or the AUP went after that, right? We didn't do it so much at the community colleges. Ron?
Yes, we had filed a grievance and they got to the grievance because they solved it before there. But yes, it was a union. Thank you.
This IT thing is still going on. I had a student contacted me yesterday to say that she could not find my course that she's enrolled in on Blackboard. So, and I contacted our distance learning director, and I said, I thought this was resolved, and she said, nope, still going on. They have students who are being dropped from, you know, and here's the thing, right? They're concerned about our enrollment. Our enrollment, you know, is down like, you know, 25% from last year at this time. And they're creating conditions that's going to ensure that the enrollment never comes back or you know, or goes even lower, because, you know, students are enrolling and then they're not being added to the courses, and they can't find the course in my ComNet, they can't find the course on Blackboard, and the problem is still ongoing. Now we're going into the second week of the semester, and I have students that cannot get to me, and my course is fully online. They cannot get to my course. So that means they cannot participate in the course. And there's no record of them being enrolled. Mm-hmm. So this is a huge, huge problem. And you know, there should be accountability somewhere.
David has a hand up and I have a hand up. David?
Oh, I just wanted to say, having been involved since 1995 with information technology policy related to teaching, especially online courses, the efforts being made now to consolidate IT at the universities and also to gain management control over online content that faculty put and make available to their students is completely retrograde. We know that for IT, help is local, and we know that faculty have to control the content of their courses, whether it's in the classroom or online. So I think those are going to be two issues that I'm especially interested in, especially since 2005, 2006, when I was on various committees at the system office for the 4 CSUs, I wrote rather lengthy critiques of efforts at consolidation of IT. To see it all coming back again is really discouraging, especially as we just had the experience during this COVID-19 that help is local. Can you imagine if you had to send in your request to Woodland Street and have that put on a queue in order to have somebody come and, you know, days or weeks later deal with the problem that you have? And just one anecdote, now that I have online connection. For some reason, I couldn't figure out some small problem that I was having with my Blackboard modules, because I was starting off clean with a new class and not importing from a previous one. To make a long story short, I called up the help desk at my university, and I don't know why, I was transferred to Blackboard. And when I spoke with the young man, I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm in North Texas." I said, "Well, nice. Hope the weather is better there than it is here." But in the end, on a fairly simple matter, which ultimately I afterwards was able to figure out myself, he couldn't help me. He put me on pause 3 times, politely, and then said he'd have to refer this to his superior, and they would contact me again by phone or by email, which they didn't do. Had I been able to get through to my local help, they could have resolved it in about 2 to 3 minutes. So I think that's just an example of the challenges that we're facing as an effort is being made to deal with the community colleges and the universities as if we're in a corporate model. I don't want to compare us. I don't want to say that their vision is an Amazon warehouse, and we would be all workers on a computerized production line. But I think it's coming close to that. I think it's a challenge for us to properly understand and explain to people who really are misinformed and misguided what is the proper relationship between central authority, which I don't deny, regional cooperation, which can be a good thing, and local autonomy, which is essential.
Yeah. So let me share, because when I said IT go, the level of frustration and sadness actually over the past couple of weeks that I've heard, I expected all of us to unload. Let me just tell you my personal experience in the past couple of weeks, and then I'll try to describe based on my conversations with IT what it was and what it wasn't. So, for me, I taught in the winter. Winter is 18 days long, which means that each day represents basically what would be a week in a normal semester. There was an attempt to do an update, I think it was the first week in January, that resulted in at least about a day of iffy connection with Blackboard. So for students who are juggling busy lives, they lost that day potentially, right? And then thinking that perhaps that wouldn't happen again, the following week, Blackboard went out again. It became really iffy. And the problem with that has continued. When you sign in, there's all this like run around with having to clear your cache again, use an incognito browser. It's, and imagine now that it's the beginning of the semester and students can't even access you to find this out necessarily, right? So there has been all of this runaround for a long time. The day before classes, I believe Banner was down in a way that made it impossible for some students to register. And I believe there was an email from the registrars to IT talking about just how catastrophic that was. So some students were unable to register. Some students who did register were unable to get into their Blackboard courses, like you said, Ron, and that's still going on. So it has been insane, right? Insane. Now, I had sent a form around a couple months ago with the idea that, with all the changes with HR and IT, given that they are the first in the trend towards so-called back office consolidation, we should sort of keep track of how well it's going, because HR has been its own absolute nightmare in terms of classes starting before part-timers have contracts, in terms of student workers getting paid, etc. However, it seems that this is not a function of that, the IT thing. It's not about shuffling people around. It's simply a matter of like a 20-something-year-old system with patches for very specific patches for every different college, etc. Or at least that's the description that Joe Tolosano gave me. He is himself very frustrated with this system. At the moment, it seems that there are still updates that haven't been done that I guess have been discovered in the process of all of this madness. So it is likely to continue because I think he said he's going to run those next week. But I know there's a lot of frustration, and because he's the CIO, that is where the frustration has been directed. He was really, happy to sit down and talk about it and describe it. And in his description, I believe he takes it to be irresolvable and is therefore probably not going to be with us much longer by his choice, right? So I don't know if you have questions about it, because my initial reaction was, oh my gosh, this is what happens when you start restructuring IT. I don't believe that this was a result of that. This was simply an old system that was not updated well. As far as the question of why on earth was it done in January, right? They were informed that this update would be coming and would be absolutely necessary by December 31st in spring of last year. But I was told that they didn't actually get the update till November. There wasn't adequate time for proper testing. And this is where we are. But there's another thing that Joe mentioned that I think is important. For him, it's a governance issue in the sense that there should be people in the room who are interacting with students and, responsible for financial aid, finance, registrars, student teaching and learning, etc. And there is a weekly meeting where that is supposed to happen, but because unless something like this happens, it seems utterly unnecessary, that has not actually been happening. So there is a need for information, like there's a serious communication issue in terms of finding out from, folks who are dealing with students when the best time is, how to best structure this, and that just has not been happening. So I did ask him, because we have we have vice president for teaching and learning and so on, is that part of that role? Apparently it is not, or at least it isn't currently part of that role, coordinating that sort of thing. So, we talked for a while. I got a lot of stuff from him, but I just thought that was the important part to mention, that isn't yet an effect of that shuffle, but it was quite a mess. And I think it says a lot about what happens when you place control so very far from students and professors. And, I don't think, yes, is it an individual problem that the communication isn't happening and that the governance isn't adequate? Or is it a structural problem and this is just too large to be handled from there? And, I think David is suggesting that it might be a structural fault, in the sense that how on earth could you have adequate governance from so far away? I don't know. So that's what I have to say about it after long conversations. But yeah, anything else? Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, that's interesting, Kalena, that conversation you had. This clearly impacts students directly. One of the charges of this committee is to communicate with the legislature as well as the Board of Regents. And, maybe we need to do that in some fashion. They need to know that this is happening and that this is directly and adversely impacting students. And I think we should know that. Probably the higher ed committee would be the vehicle we'd use. But I think they need to know that, and they need to put some pressure on system office to, do what they can to resolve the problem. Because clearly system office is not responsive to any concerns of faculty or staff or students.
All right. Now, so having only discovered yesterday that these are two separate issues, I suppose we should think about what you've just proposed, Fran, which is that we approach the legislature about this specific issue, which I think is the result of maybe decades of improperly maintaining that system. If it extends, I think, to before our current leadership of that, of IT existed. So there's that issue. And then there's also a separate issue, which is we are likely to experience more disruption as things get shuffled around in IT in the same way that we have definitely felt the effects of things getting shuffled around in HR. And the question is, how do we document those felt effects in a way that is not just anecdotal or subjective? And how do we act on them? So maybe one at a time, because I just saw a hand and then lost. Oh, Lois. Go ahead, Lois. You're muted, Lois.
Yeah, sorry. I think if we're talking about the age of the system, we're kind of begging the question. The timing is the whole issue. And if they know ahead of time that they're working with an old system, they need to be aware even more so of the timing. After the first upgrade in January during the winter session that they screwed up royally, Joe McAuliffe came out with an email the following week before they had the second upgrade saying everything has been fixed. This is going to go really well. It's all done. It's going to be fine. And as soon as they did the upgrade, it wasn't fine anymore. And it's still not fine. So the age of the system is completely secondary to how this was done. The timing it was done, and I have a feeling, this is my feeling, that the higher up people were not informed of how bad this was.
And again, even Joe more than once said there is a communication problem, and in terms of receiving communication. And then also he's proposing that maybe from now on, when there are issues with IT, that perhaps he can start communicating with us all using the same system that we use for weather advisories, because he feels like there's such an urgent lack of two-way information. But again, when you have it's large, it's a very large system, so that'll begin to do it. But yeah, clearly there might have been times in December that might have been much better, right? Any proposals? Go ahead, Ron. And then David.
Who did you say, Kalina?
You, and then David. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This is again the problem, the same problem I was mentioning with Acme, right? With Acme, when you have colleges doing 12 things and you're learning from each other and you're making changes and you're basically, they're all little petri dishes that are doing the best, coming up with the best ideas, and then you adopt and scale out those best ideas. That works really well. But when you have one system that affects the entire state and that system goes down, right? Everybody in the state is blacked out rather than that one college that's being affected, right? So this is, again, all the problems that we keep encountering are arguments against consolidation, are arguments that this does not work, that this will be damaging, that when problems happen, now instead of just affecting a small part, it metastasizes and affects the entire state. It's really it really is an argument that we shouldn't be going down this road.
David?
Yeah, I would just add, Ron's point is a good one about over-centralization. But another aspect of the problem is Blackboard. Blackboard is an inferior product. It is inferior relative to other learning management systems, such as Desire to Learn or Canvas. And there's a whole long history whereby Blackboard has been able to perpetuate itself at the system office level. And so I think I just want to add that as another example. Moreover, it's costly. Had we implemented on a local and regional basis Moodle, which is open source software, which has been used at many universities, plus Zoom, we could have got better than what we have now at lower cost.
Go ahead, Liz.
I just want to clarify that this was not a Blackboard issue, it's an Ellucian issue. It affected Banner as well. It affected Banner as well as Blackboard, and it was an Ellucian. It is an Ellucian issue, not a specifically Blackboard issue.
Yeah, yeah. So it's partly the age of the system and all the patches and custom code, but also the fact that Ellucian is just really not doing its job. And oh, I should say that so Joe said that he actually forwarded the resolution, though I'm not sure if he means the resolution or like the letter from the registrars, but he forwarded at least one of those things that details how impactful this is to Ellucian, right? And kind of demanded that they improve what they're doing. But yeah, all of this is certainly an argument against this over-centralization and reliance on a single entity. And it shows you the challenges of communication, right? So on to the previous issue before our lives turned hell for the last couple of weeks. There is still an issue of HR and IT, you know, as the first bits of back office functions, so-called, being consolidated. And again, each one of us has our own experience, I would say, in addition to the winter course, in addition to being interrupted, in addition to students not being able to register, and students who are registered not being able to get into Blackboard. There's also some of our transfer students who were affected because I believe because their grades weren't updated in Banner in time, they couldn't get them over to transfer colleges. So there's all kinds of madness. That is my experience, but it is interesting. Or I think in order to respond or advise, right? This is the function of the Faculty Advisory Committee, to advise on these structural issues. We have to have proper information. And again, because the system is so very large, it is very hard to figure out how much of this is my perception. Was I hit particularly hard? How much of this was, you should hear people talk about the challenges of HR at Gateway. Is that a Gateway issue or is that another issue? I think those are things that we should get clear on. And I would like to know your opinion of using something like the form, even if it needs to be modified, that I have shared with you all, that is simply a place, if we could circulate it over all 12 colleges and collect feedback about the impacts of these sorts of shifts, that would put us in a position to be better able to speak from what's actually happening versus our perceptions of what might be happening. Because of course it's the people who complain that you hear, right? Everybody else who's doing just fine, you don't hear from. And you know, because I found it so striking when we had a conversation where David Blitz mentioned in a board meeting, you know, this whole idea of help being local and about, you know, centralizing it far from the source being potentially detrimental. And we were sort of schooled on the fact that not necessarily, right? Without that awareness of the fact that we were in fact experiencing the effects of that right now. And that perhaps if we were speaking from a place, we were speaking from experience. But it's not just personal experience, it should be from the whole group. So I would like to know whether we want to approve the use. Maybe I have to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we make use of something like the form that I have circulated to collect as much information as we can about the actual effects of this kind of reshuffling as it goes on. And hopefully towards the end of the semester, we will have an accurate idea of how impactful or not impactful it is. I mean, any change is going to be disruptive, but you know, whether it goes beyond that, right? So that is my motion, that we use that form and it is a form that does not require that anyone identify themselves, but encourages people to identify themselves so that we could follow up if we need more information.
I'll second that, Kalena.
Okay. Any discussion or recommendations for modification? Go ahead, Lois, and I'll see if I can find it to share. Go ahead. You're muted again.
Sorry, I keep forgetting that. Could I suggest that we include business office as well? Because I'm hearing from a number of people about purchase recs that were never paid. And they've got vendors who are now furious because they were supposed to have been paid like last September. Purchase recs not going through in any kind of a timely manner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that kind of stuff.
Colina, are you talking? Because I can't. Are you on mute?
I was chatting away. Yes, I was. Sorry. So this is what the form looks like at the moment. It currently specifies HR and IT issues, asks for any concerns, specific experiences, suggestions, etc. It has HR and IT, and you've suggested what, finance or business, Lois, so that can be added. It's got other, college and name optional, and then in particular, I think it's interesting to ask for feedback from members of the departments, right? So that we can be informed by the people who actually know how things might or should work. All right. Other than adding the business office, any other suggestions or any concerns about the form? I do have slight concerns that it amounts to sort of critiquing our colleagues' work, but that's not really what it's intended to do. Okay, can we vote on? Oh, go ahead, Fran.
Just briefly, and my other concern, and I'm sure you share this, is will we have enough people who will be willing to give feedback? I hope, but that's always a tough sell.
Yeah, I think that's the concern, and I think we're going to have to talk about the level of participation that will be necessary for this to even be informative, right? Because we can all share our experiences in this small group, and if people don't participate, I think we just let it go. But it is at the moment the best suggestion, because, you know, David and I sit on that board and are meant to represent the faculty, and there's a suspicion that something's going on, right? We certainly hear the stories, but I'd like to really portray it as accurately as possible. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, we let it go. And I think for the most part, these are things that we will review and not like, no one's going to be outed, no personal names or anything like that. So, yeah. All right, should we take a vote on it and do it in the, David, do you have your, Blitz, do you have your hand up again, or is that from before? Okay, cool. All right, let's do our usual. Is anyone opposed to the use of this form? Okay, so can we say that it is unanimously accepted that we're going to attempt this?
Well, call for the yays.
Okay, yeah. Everyone in favor? Just a verbal yay?
Yay.
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 Okay. Sounds good. And any abstentions? Abstentions. Okay. So again, for this to be successful, we really have to try to circulate it at every single one of our institutions. So please try to get them out through your governance bodies or whatever is most appropriate to have it circulating as widely as is possible. And also, I mean, you know, so it was striking to me, get this, I have something potentially good to say about consolidation. One of the things that Joe Tolosano mentioned was that one of the benefits of that is that there would be, it should be building the system from scratch rather than laying on top of 20 plus years of mess, right? And it's supposed to be built parallel and run parallel for a while so that it can actually be tested and the transition can be clean. So I don't know, maybe that will happen, maybe not. So, you know, positives are also quite welcome.
Kalina,
Right.
this is Mike Day.
Go ahead.
Kalina, could you make sure you send that form outside of Google? Could you send it to us as a form so we can just send it to the campus?
Oh, okay. So like as a
As
paper
attachment.
version?
As an attachment.
Okay. At the moment, it's a fillable Google form that goes to a database. But we can accept.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we need the link then, obviously.
That's the most efficient way of collecting the information.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just for some reason when I click the link, I can't. It never takes me to Google, but it might not. It might just be me. It might work for other people. So I'll talk to Sean and we'll make sure we get it to Southern people. Thank you.
Okay, great. And let me know if anyone else has that issue. It might be the sharing option that I put on it. I might not have adjusted it.
Yeah, I when I click on it, it never goes. Thank you.
I had the same problem. It would spin and spin, and I had to download it in order to open it. So, problem.
Okay, I will play with it and then send out something final, you know, early next week at least. Okay. All right. Item 6, NETRI reports. I will give that to you, Lois.
Okay. Yeah, okay. NETCHI reports, I guess generally speaking, when you're doing NETCHI reports, either the 50 or 10-year reports that are being done, are you running into issues where what's being documented is watered down a bit to accommodate the consolidation issues? Yes, no? None of you are having that problem?
Okay.
Well, at Tunxus, I know of 2 veteran faculty who were summarily dismissed from the Standard 3 subcommittee. And I have more than suspicions that they were summarily dismissed. They were determined to do a fair and honest account of that standard, which would include a critique of the relationship between the college and the Board of Regents. Beyond that, I think we have to wait to see what the final report reads. Unfortunately, we don't have that yet. We are working on our 10-year self-study at Tunxus.
So do you have a lead writer or anything?
Yes,
When is your 10-year report due?
it is due this year, actually. So we're in the midst of writing it, actually.
Was it due during the summer?
I believe it is, actually, yes.
Okay, anybody else?
I can Lois, that I was co-chairing Standard 8, the assessment standard for our 10-year, which is due 2022. And when the system office did not renew the Aqua contract that we were using for our assessment, and especially our large-scale gen ed assessments, I said to our dean, I said, I can't lead this anymore. I mean, my entire program for assessment was based on the use of this tool for really doing some deep, assessment student work. And so I said, I can't support this anymore. And his response in trying to get me to stay on, we have other measures that we use to determine student effectiveness, and was referring to data from the system office, which I know is key performance indicators, which I don't think those KPIs really are not assessment data. That they are not assessment data. And so if that's what they're going to put in as proof of us doing direct observation of student skills and student ability, then that is completely inappropriate for Standard 8 from my perspective. No, that's ancillary data, and again, I don't know what the result's going to be, because the committees were just formed last fall, and I'm not sure what they're going to do, but I don't want to have any part of that. I don't think right now we don't have anyone leading assessment at our college because I resigned from that. So we'll see what happens. I do know in the 5-year report I had written up about, I'd said things about consolidation as being detrimental, and was told that the language had to be toned down. But so I'm not sure. Once that was told to me, I just basically gave up on trying to work on revising that document, because I assumed that it was just going to be that what I wanted in there was not going to be in there. But again, I didn't look at what I don't remember what the final version. I don't remember if I even, because I was so demoralized. But that's just what I have to say about that topic.
I'll say that it ended up.
So we're going to.
Oh, go ahead, Lois.
Sorry, Kalina. No, I was just going to verify with Ron. So they're going to use system office data to determine what's going on with your students. Is that what what you're saying?
I was told that we did while Aqua was and direct assessment of student work was helpful and was a good idea. There are other ways that we can prove that we're doing assessment of student performance, and one way would be the data that we get from the system office. Which I the associate dean of institutional effectiveness, I know what that data is, and it's not assessment data. It's credit completion, right, graduation rate, that kind of. That's not assessment data.
Yeah. They're actually, as I remember it, they're actually looking for data from the college itself. That's part of the accreditation process.
Right.
Oh, no.
Alina.
The data. Well, basically, the system office produces the data, on each institution. We get, when you get the KPIs, they come from the system office, but it's broken down by institution. So basically, it's the centralization of IR.
I understand, Ron, but one of the concerns that NIAS/NECHI wrote about was the fact that they had a concern about IR being consolidated at the system office level. So it would seem to me that if you're quoting data from the system office, that would be detrimental to your report.
I would think so. I was very much opposed to consolidation of IR. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I stepped down from my administration job as associate dean, because I oversaw IR and was unhappy with because I didn't think consolidation was appropriate or was going to make us a more effective institution. And quite frankly, I was worried about my job.
Right. Yeah, Kalina, Gateway.
Yeah, so and can I just in response to Ron, I mean, beyond what NETU demands of us, because what NETU demands is not the highest of bars, right? And it is our responsibility to set the standards that we want. It's my understanding that the reflective process of assessment is an important part of being an effective instructor. And this is something we should all be engaging with. We should not be simply receiving data, this output from the system office. This is something that we do together. We reflect on it's a bizarre way of looking at things to simply think that we look at a spreadsheet and check that box. Okay, send that to NetSheet, moving right along. That's insane. Anyway, yeah, the reason that that this was on the agenda is because I have heard, other than through FAC members, about concerns at, I'd say either 4 or 5, I think 5, let's say definitely 4 colleges, where the concern is really that there is such revision, and often revision that is either influenced by or pressured by people who are not at their college, that the legitimacy, regardless of the content, the legitimacy of the report itself seems to be in question. At Gateway, two of the people most involved, sort of leading our NETU process, are not employees of Gateway. One of them retired a couple of years ago. One of them has not had an office in our building for a couple of years. Both are at system office. That just seems odd. So, the question was, is that happening elsewhere? I know that Norwalk had written something up about a similar issue. And if it has, is there something that we want to do in response, or some way that we want to document it?
I think, yes, I think we should. At Norwalk, what happened was I was the lead writer for the 50-year report in 2019. And when I handed the final report to be sent by our administration, they edited what I had written, and I didn't get to see the edited document until after it was sent. And I have to be honest, they didn't take a whole lot out, but they did take stuff out that I had written that was detrimental to the consolidation issues. There was stuff still in there, so I'll say that, but it was edited. But I didn't have what you've got people who are no longer at Gateway writing this report. I don't even know how that can be allowed to happen. But I think those things, some of these things have to be documented, because one of the themes that NETU keeps coming back with is that, the colleges must stay independently accredited while all the rest of this is going on. And if we can show that that's not happening, I mean, I don't know what's going. I think Quinnipiac Valley is also writing its 10-year report right now. I don't know what's going on there. But I do think we should get this stuff together and file it with NETU, file it as a letter with NETU that these things are happening.
So do you want to propose something? I mean, I think it would be better to gather this information if there's a small group of people who are sort of looking into it and corresponding with folks, as opposed to, I think people are unlikely to just, talk to everybody, but they might have conversations with a smaller group who might want to look into this. So if we think it warrants looking into, we could make that group now, or we can kick it down the road and see if we hear more about it.
Well, I don't know. I could see we could hold off until like next month. I think my thought would be that it should go in about the same time as the update, which the update from System Office to Netchi is due in April. My understanding is they're asking for an extension.
Okay.
So I think we wouldn't have to do it right now.
Okay. Let's move on then. Item 7, inviting system office leadership to future meetings. So there have been a couple of suggestions made, and there have been there's at least one request. So Tanya Miller, who is, I should get her title right. It's teaching and learning. I'm going to look at her actual, I want to say vice president, interim vice president, but Tanya Milner has asked for a couple of kinds of input from us. One is that she is responsible for, let me just mute a couple of folks here. Okay, she is responsible for the strategic plan for the Consolidated College and would like to know if the FAC chairs would like to have some input, if the FAC as a whole would like to have some input. It seems to me that if anyone is going to give feedback on that strategic plan, it should be the FAC as a whole. But I don't know if that's something that we want to schedule for our February meeting to have Tanya Milner talk about the strategic plan with us. The other request that she's made is that, and I'm not familiar with this, so some of you may be, I believe she's reviving the teaching and learning, let me look for the correct name of it. I keep opening the wrong document, hold on. Where is this? She's reinstating the Teaching and Learning Council. So I don't know that I'm familiar with this. It has already met 3 times, but she is inviting our participation and would like to know if any of us would like to serve on that committee. That's another thing that we could discuss with her. She did share the mission with us, but that might be something that we want to talk with her about. So there's the potential for Tanya Milner, and then the requests from, a member of this committee suggested that bringing in Dr. Gates would be beneficial. Someone who's not a member of this committee, but who fully expected that we would get that report promised in January, expected that Ben Barnes would be here with us this month. So those are other things that have been suggested. So just wondering which of those things you're interested in. Go ahead, Ron.
I would suggest perhaps referring Tanya to the shared governance body for the new Connecticut State Community College, because they would want to put somebody perhaps on a committee for that college. I'm not sure if FAC the appropriate body for writing a strategic plan for a college that is not a member of our group. But obviously the Faculty Senate for the Connecticut State Community College would be an excellent body to find representation from.
Lois?
Wouldn't participating in either one of those things go against what we voted on as far as not participating?
Yep, I believe it would, but the invitation is there, and just want to make sure that we all know about it. Anyone else?
A quick comment on the strategic plan. I saw that you did send to us the PowerPoint, and I was impressed by whoever produced it. Did it in 6 different colors, including that was the first time I seen that, including yellow, which is really hard to read.
On a brown background, yes.
It's on a brown background. So, do we know more about this council, because they give all the membership, including 3 faculty reps? Do we know who that is, and do we know what the status of the CT State Executive Planning Council membership is? By CT state, do they mean the system, CSUS, or do they mean the state of Connecticut?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
find out a bit more about this. Maybe I'll send back a query to her to ask about for more information. It seems to be some sort of state level thing because it does say there is one BOR rep. I don't know who that might be. So the 12 CC's plans and priorities, right? All as bullet points. It's really quite skimpy.
Let me share the document briefly. I will say that I personally, saw it presented and didn't connect, but I am that way with strategic plans, I believe. So I don't know if that's the document or me. Let me just share it with you just for a moment to get a sense of what it is they are discussing and also the membership. So this is very much a working document. It is a draft, and they've asked for input, and I believe they'll be working on this throughout the semester, I guess in preparation for that NETU report. So there are the goals, plans and priorities, and I am looking for membership. Here we go. So the planning council, this is the projected membership. 3 student reps, 3 faculty reps. And I don't believe that we are asked to be part of that. We're just asked to give feedback on it.
What are all these things? EMSA, DEI, COT, what are all that? What's that mean?
Well, COT is College of Technology. Is that right?
Okay. What's DEI and EMSA?
Don't know.
Yeah, so I think what we'll do is I'll send back, because I got a copy of this as well, or Kalina, you can do it, to ask for a clarification of this. Because when they talk about CT state mission and vision, right, they seem to be talking about the one community college, right? This seems to be
It's entirely about the one community college.
Yeah.
Yes. And Ron's point, I think, is correct. And that was my reason for not necessarily sharing it and also not quite knowing what to say to her, because we just seem to be an inappropriate body, or at least I'm happy to be involved, but it seems that we're skipping a step. It should have gone through some sort of Senate governance process or, somebody. We don't seem to be the right folks. So response, do we need to have some sort of engagement with her? And the actual title is Associate Vice President of Teaching and Learning. Or our response will be that participating in this council goes against our already established resolution to not do so. Is that the position that we are taking? And do we need to take a vote on that? Or is that seen to be, it's a done deal. We've already voted on that.
Yeah, in terms of their process, the only time they mention us is share principles with deans, councils, and FAC in January 2021. I presume that meant sending us this PowerPoint. I mean, a PowerPoint is not a document. PowerPoint's a PowerPoint, right? And so I think one of the things that we need to clarify with them is, where is the document? A strategic plan is normally a document, not a series of bullet points in a PowerPoint.
Right.
So I think that's a preliminary comment before this, and then we can ask for a clarification on their representation.
Okay. All right, so we'll leave that there. Is there a desire to invite anyone else from the system office? Is there a need for that sort of engagement anytime soon? Like I said, a few names had been passed, but they were not officially proposed. They were just asked.
Could I make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
The discussion that we had here with Jen and Myrna and Mary Beth and Ron and Barbara about that the ASME business, the math and English, was really excellent. And I was thinking as the folks were discussing, I wish that Jane Gates had been there. And in that respect, I would say it doesn't harm us, and it certainly could help us in a tactical way to have her present. So I would suggest inviting Jane Gates, as we did David Levinson. It's not going to change the world, but it does give an opportunity for the very eloquent members of this committee to express their concerns directly to the people involved.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with David. I think it'd be good to invite her, and we could even do it under the guise of not under the guise of, but we could also combine it with a kind of congratulations that you're there, and you would like to start, talk to you. So I think it could be helpful too.
Okay.
I mean, we had a vote on this the last time for David Levinson. I don't know if you want to do it again, but I would propose inviting Jane Gates to the next meeting.
Shall we take a vote? And I guess we'll do it in the usual, should we do a poll on this
Do
one?
a poll. A
Yeah.
poll is, I think, better in this case.
Okay, I will do that in just a
It's always
second.
a challenge to get those polls going.
Yeah. Stressful.
Could you give me the choice of either sticking pins in my eyes or inviting Jane Gates?
I know the Lois said you weren't going to be too happy.
Lois needs no anonymity.
I take it that's a no on your part.
You would be absolutely right, David.
Being
I think she's made her position very clear at the CSET meeting.
By the way, could somebody remind me what CSET stands for? I sometimes get lost in the acronyms.
Community College English teacher.
Connecticut Coalition of English Teachers.
I've opened this poll panel more than once now, and for some reason I'm not. So just give me a moment.
Actually,
If it's
Colina,
allowable, yes, I can
was just
figure this out during the conference update. Yes, Mike?
I was just going to say, why don't we just vote? I don't think anybody's going to be embarrassed about where they stand on this. So, can you just ask for the yeas and the nays?
Sure.
Means if people aren't comfortable with it, then we
Yeah,
won't.
I'm
but
okay.
It seems faster.
And actually, I got it, and I agree with your suggestion. And yet, I'm so thrilled that I got it that I want to use it. If you don't mind. So I am going to start it right now.
Okay, makes sense.
There you go. All right, and while that's going on, item 8 is the conference update, and I think Myrna, did you want to take us through that?
On mute. I'm on mute. Hold on. Thank you. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So the committee has met 3 times already, thanks to Kalina's leadership. We in our first meeting, we decided we were going to talk about the conference theme, time and format, potential keynote speakers, funding, because you may or may not know BOR is not funding the conference this year. And then in our second meeting, we talked about a theme, right? And please, if you do, because the members of the committee or those who are still on, can you please just fill in the gaps, because my notes are a little cryptic where you see fit. The conference theme we came up with was New Future for Higher Education Under Siege. We still felt very strongly, given all of the information we received today with regard to the disregard for shared governance, that we are going to entitle it the 6th Annual Conference on Student Success and Shared Governance. And the theme will be, as I indicated, New Futures for Higher Education Under Siege. We talked about potential format of the conference being that it is going to be virtual, that we have a keynote speaker, of which Kalina sent us some video presentations. And Kalina, you might want to talk about those speakers to the committee. We then thought we would also the format would be with panelists as well as potentially breakout sessions. We spoke about potentially having 2 dates, but that's still somewhat being debated, I think, at least from my perspective. And so the dates that we have, we wanted to try to be consistent with the dates that have been set in the past. So we are looking at April the 16th, right? And we're looking at potential March 26th, and I believe we have April 30th. I got those dates from our last meeting, Kalina, but I may be wrong on those dates. But if we have 2 dates, it will be from that selection, or maybe the committee could correct me if I'm wrong. We did proceed with some of the discussions that we would like speakers to address on the panel, and that would be on austerity and neoliberalism, the implications of our institutions, both inside and outside the classroom, and successful resistance to these influences and what we can learn from them. Now, one of the things that we are working on is sending a save the date, because we did at least get somewhat of confirmation from one of the speakers on the New Deal, right? And that would be, was Breyer from the New Deal, I believe, right? And so we have a person that would be serving on the panel, and several of the committee members are reaching out to other members that we're identifying, we're targeting, if you will. We're not sending out an open invitation to everyone with regard to panelists. And so we are asking the committee to make suggestions to us if they know of speakers that could address these topics that I just mentioned. Further, it was suggested that we ask this committee, the FAC committee, to potentially identify some questions, some really thought-provoking questions that the speakers could address. And finally, we're just, I guess, I think that's where we are. I mean, it's a short, kind of brief presentation, but at least you know the theme, you know the dates, you know the potential format, and what we have been discussing in these 3 meetings. I'm not sure if I left anything out for those. Kalina, there were a couple of things I'd like you to talk about. And also, Lois had some great suggestions on speakers. So we're looking for speakers for panels, breakout sessions, right? And potentially, that's it, right?
Yeah, thanks. At the moment, so Breyer, who is confirmed, who will function as a panelist, I guess, he's a co-author of Austerity Blues. So he kind of talks about what happens in moments like these, especially, right? It happened after the Great Recession, that there tend to be a trend towards greater cuts. And if you look at our, what's going on with our contracts, right, with AAUP and so on, you're seeing that that's exactly the direction that we're going in, reducing every time that there is a financial crisis. So he's more diagnosis, and then there's been a suggestion for engaging with the New Deal for higher education, who are people who have a vision for the future. There's Briars from CUNY. A lot of the New Deal folks are from the area and from Rutgers. And that whole conversation, we're hoping to have some sort of national influence or regional influence, but also some local folks to have potentially 2 panels. And then Lois has pointed out that while that day is totally sort of structured around the sort of socioeconomic pressures on our institutions, the student success part that has historically been part of our conference, the direct student success part has been left out. So she's made some suggestions for a potential second day, but we don't know if that's happening yet.
The other thing I wanted to mention was the unions are, we're asking the unions to fund the conference if we have any expenses just to pay the speakers. And we have got secured some funding to date, which is great in light of the fact that I think some of us are struggling because we are a faculty advisory committee to the BOR. We're struggling with using that as a title, but I think we have to, just because we are a body that advises, right? So we have to use that, and we have to use them even though they're not funding or supporting. Just, I hope that's recorded, so, but it's true. I only say the truth. Any comments, or Lois, did you want to comment on some of the speakers or that you had recommended?
I can, there are 2. One is from Rutgers and one is from Fordham University. Christina Greer, who is has been a guest on MSNBC a number of times, and Brittany, and I'm blanking on her last name right now, who is from Rutgers and has also been a guest on MSNBC. And I guess Christina Greer in particular was the one that kind of, the light went off when she was talking about how she's a political science faculty member, and she was talking about how she, under the current, with all that's going on right now, how she makes sure the students are it's how they can interpret all this within the media issues. So it goes on. Anyway, I have to reach out to both of those and see if they're available, and if so, if they're going to charge or what's going to happen. So I will let you know more when I find out more.
Did you want me to share one of the members' email about the questions, like Eric's some of the questions, or leave that for another meeting, Kalina and Lois?
Do you want to? Actually, let's share them, because then folks can send us additional questions. It's a short list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric is one of the members that has some great ideas. And some of the recommendations was, as we're looking for potential panelists and speakers, to ask them if they can address these following questions. What do you think has been the most significant economic and structural changes to public higher education over the past so many decades? Can you describe the effects of austerity and neoliberalism on public higher education? To what extent has the role of public higher education changed in the economic environment? What implications does this evolving role and position have for institutions both inside and outside the classroom? And where are students and faculty successfully pushing back? What can we learn from these struggles? So those were some great questions that address the theme. It addressed, what I think is important, especially at present with what we're all going through. And any additional, I don't know if, it would be nice if the faculty advisory committee would suggest other questions as it relates to the theme, and maybe identify individuals that have done work around these topics, right?
Yeah. So you can email, I just realized that we've been meeting over January, but we've never officially formed. I actually emailed anyone who kind of suggested that they might be interested. So the group currently consists of, it's me, Myrna, Lois, Mary Beth. And as usual, we have folks who are not officially in the FAC. So Bill Faraklis, who has always been very involved in the conference, Stephen Adair, who is not a stranger to the FAC, and we have Eric Moroni from Community College, who is just a great resource and has been for a while. So that's who it is, but it's clearly open if you want to join, or just email one of us if you've got questions and stuff like that. Is that it for this topic?
And also recommendations, because we are talking about whether or not to have it as a 2-day, right? That was one of the issues that came up, or not issues, conversations around whether to have a 2-day or just a 1 day. And, the comments were 1 day sitting there in front of a computer is a little bit much for some. And then the other would be, if we break it up into 2 days, at least you have, time to do other things. And we may not get the same population. It may be a different population for the second day for different topics. Which were, for the second day, we also talked about poster, not the poster. What did we call it? The poster, virtual posters.
Yeah, in the past, people participated by doing posters, and we thought that maybe it would be interesting to do like a virtual version of that, because the idea for the second day was this thought that it could be focused on, what is the value, the sort of cultural value of the public education that we provide. These are the speakers that Lois has suggested are all about sort of information consumption and that sort of thing, right? How do we teach people how to consume information responsibly? And if there were ever a moment in our nation's history that seems to be important, it would be now. And I know that we all do things, towards this end. I know that Barbara certainly is always talking about what she does, and I always want to know what it is, so we could potentially, if we could figure out how, share them virtually. Okay, so you know who to contact then. And thank you, Myrna. So David has told me that the measure of success for a chair is to get through this agenda in 2.5 hours or less. So this was my first shot at it. It was a trial run. I'll try again. We only have 2 more things, and they are very short, I think. Barbara, can you talk about FAC elections, item 9? Barbara, are you there? I'm pretty sure she's calling user 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Barbara? Okay, so I'll just quickly say the general idea of things, and maybe we'll return to this because we have loads of time. Just that this is going to be an election year, right? We have elections in even numbered years, and a new crop of us begins in the odd numbered years. So we will need
You hear
to.
me now?
Yes. Hi, Barbara. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. I had to do the *6 thing to get off, and I had to pull off the road to do that. Anyway, okay. So should I go ahead?
Yes,
You
go ahead.
started. Okay. We generally do the election in the spring. We don't have to, but we generally do, so that then the new people could come to meetings in the fall and get to know the group, transition. And if we're going to do them in the spring, it would need to start very soon, because at the community colleges, it's a little bit complicated. At the universities, it's much simpler. And someone really needs to step up and be the chair of the election committee, which has to have somebody from the universities too. But that job is pretty easy. You just contact, a few people, and they make sure they have ways they do it on each campus. But the community college one is complicated. It depends on getting to know the Senate leaders at the campuses and being in touch with them and explaining it all to them. And it's not simple. And last time we did it, Kalina said she might be willing to do it the next time, and Kalina really understands it. So I'm hoping she's going to be the one who wants to do the community colleges, to be mainly responsible for the community colleges. There's a committee, but it really has to be one person who's constantly in touch with these 12 campuses, making sure it all goes on time, kind of. That's about it. And I'd be very happy to be not the person again. It was a lot of work, especially the first time. But I'd be very happy to share my materials, answer questions, and say how we did it last time and things like that.
Okay. And yes, last time I tried to pay attention, because I did want to definitely be of use this time, because it is confusing. I made a flow chart because it was like, what? But I did not know that I would be also chairing the whole committee at the time.
Well, I was just hoping, because
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I'll say this: I will work with anyone who wants to do this. So if not knowing the process is an obstacle to you taking it on, I will, between me and Barbara, you'll have, I think, everything you need to know in terms of understanding the mechanics of it. I do think that it's a really, especially as you describe it, Barbara, about getting to know all the Senate leaders, it could be a really nice exercise in really getting connected with the larger community, getting to know these folks. So
it is. No, that part was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would encourage someone who has not been engaged in that way before, who wants to please take it on, and I will, we will absolutely be resources for you and work with you and be super involved. Think about it, and we'll settle it in February. How about that? Because I have done that. And I have to say, I absolutely love having those connections. It's really nice to know, to have those streams of communication and so on. It makes you feel really connected. So, I think these leaders tend to be cool people. So I'm going to suggest that someone take it on. I will, then I guess we'll come back to it in February. We'll have enough time, right, Barbara, if we come back in February?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Last item, documents received. Okay, so I am hoping, wow, David, not only are you connected, but you are illuminated.
Sunlight.
The enlightened one, as you should be. So I'm hoping this is kind of a standing item or an item as needed on our agenda. And so here's the idea. The fact is we all have common issues. There are always these resolutions and so on circulating between us. but you kind of have to like get it in a piecemeal fashion. You have to know a person who knows a person at this school or that school or whatever. There is no centralized place to find out what is happening at other colleges. You know, if I have an issue, have they already, has someone, you know, I sent a resolution to the system office and I don't realize that 3 other colleges have the same issue and sent a resolution. So it does seem, especially in this transition, that FAC could function as that place because it's one place where we have representation from every institution in the system. So as I said, I talked with Andrew Morris. We set up a way to share documents completely publicly where they're not constrained by our, you know, community colleges or by our university or anything like that. And from now on, what I would suggest is that, for example, I shared all of those things with the agenda. They're all now there publicly. Anyone can go get them. And we will create a space on the website. We're still figuring out how to design this correctly, that you can go to and find all of the documents that have been submitted to the FAC on the assumption that they are items of interest to the FAC, when we might take action on them later or look into them, or simply we should be informed that these things are happening. So I actually have 3 of those things, the ones that I sent you after I sent the agenda. I accidentally sent you a draft of the comparison chart from CMAC, and there's a final version, so I sent that. And there were 2 other items. The CSET statement was not in my original list, and the CMAC response to the full response, not just the comparison table. I also sent the gateway resolution on IT, right? And I don't know how we should, maybe you can tell me what you think. Should we have like a vote each time to say we're going to include these in our public documents, or should it just be, if you want to submit them during items received, we say thank you very much, and then those are, we understand that those things will be posted. Is there a need for a vote? No? Okay, so I, at this point, will add those 4 things and we will figure out how they will be posted, but I want to encourage you to, any documents of that sort that are resolutions at the different colleges and so on, just bring them to meetings. And we can receive them, even if they're not related to items on the agenda at that moment, because they may inform items that might be on the agenda down the line. Does that make sense? And does that seem helpful? It's just a way to keep us all talking to each other, all the universities, the colleges, and all being aware of what's happening. Okay, so that's the entirety of that.
I just want to add, it's important to have some sort of system of to find things, because there are so many documents.
Right.
After a while, even if we have access to a whole list of 75 documents, it may be difficult to figure out what is current and which are the related documents. So hopefully there'll be a system of folders.
Yeah.
Some finding apparatus, perhaps a document which sort of lists by category all of the other documents updated on a regular basis. I know that's a lot of work, but otherwise, you know, it becomes sort of an info glut. There's just too much.
Yeah, it makes it a mess. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to sort out. And I'm talking to Andrew about it, but I also talked to like a librarian friend about it. If anyone feels particularly talented in that area, please let me know and we could figure out, but we'll run the final structure past everyone to make sure it's workable. How about that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is that it? All right, I believe we've come to the end of our meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to release us?
I will make a motion.
And we don't need a second. Is that right?
That's
Congratulations on your first this.
Yes.
Good job.
Why, thank you. We are free. And I will stop recording now.